All right, we're back. We are live. Allison keeps changing up on me. She looks even more different than last week. Still has the facial hair, but changing the hairstyle and crazy. How are you doing today, Alice?
But my voice maybe I can't get the high voice, the higher pitched voice for Allison, but I'm sorry. It's going to be hurtful on the viewer's eyes because I'm a little rougher looking than Allison. So
Yeah, but bringing the gravitas here, we've got a New York story to discuss later. Bring somebody in here from New York. What are we going to do? How are you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing all right. It's one of those things. School's starting to get back in the flow and stuff like that. I think there's like this transition from summer to fall. That's just like you're aware the work, the that part of the work calendar is coming in because obviously I used to teach. So the summer was like the free time, and then when you get to August, it's like the kids are coming back and we got to start things back over again. So.
I didn't even think about that. That's so scary. I guess being a dink, I don't really think about kids in school, but I guess we are headed into fall. I was just thinking September is when we'd be dealing with all that, but wow, crazy.
Well, I know there are a couple of schools. I think the private schools here, what they wanted to do is start back. They extended the school year extra like 2 weeks. So what they're going to do is 2 weeks before September, they're going to start like it with half a days. Just to kind of acclimate everybody and work out some of the kinks with the new COVID restrictions. How the mask going to work. How we're going to do lunch. They can't do everything. You can't have just everybody in the lunchroom at one time now because of certain restrictions. So they're trying to. I think they usually just 2 weeks to try to just figure it out, and then after that they're back in school full time.
No, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And it was funny when I grew up in Tucson. Our school started in August, and then across town they would start in September. So. Of course, I was always annoyed having to go back early. Never mind that I got out in May and they got out in June, but that doesn't count.
No. It's like the U.S. women's soccer team. They would have made $66 million more, but they could have also won nothing. It's so interesting. I hate to go on this tangent, but today I was arguing with someone over the U.S. women's soccer team, right? About the fact that they got the soccer team, the fact that their equal pay lawsuit got thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
And the person was saying, and the point that I was trying to make to the person is that the only thing that they were doing, the only thing the U.S. women's soccer team was doing was just more or less saying,
losing.
Yeah, that's true. They are losing. But they were just asking, they were saying, well, we could have made more under the men's deal. But if you think about it, last year during the pandemic, there could be no games, right? There were no games being played last year. So if we just take last year as an example of how good the women's deal was, they each got paid their $100,000 salary, right? They were salaried employees. So last year, when there's no soccer games that could have been played, the women got paid $100,000 salaries. The men, because they had a pay-to-play option, they got paid nothing during the pandemic. Absolutely nothing. U.S. Soccer paid them not a dime because they only get paid if they play in a game. So by only looking at one side of that spectrum, it's like you don't understand that their downside is so much better than the men's downside, because last year I think was a perfect example. The men got paid nothing. So we're talking about equal pay. How can you have equal pay in that situation? One side got paid nothing, and they all got $100,000 a year salaries. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yep, and as Tyler Durden brought up, plus maternity leave, full benefits, etc. But Nate, I'm sorry, you had to be fact checked.
Yes. It was a great fact check too. It was like, all right, well, it's true. It's funny because I don't know why news organizations are hesitant to say it's actually true. What the judge found factually to be true, right? Because for some reason, this case, and maybe this may be more to you, is that this case has been coached in the media as the next civil rights case, right? Equal pay for women. But the fact is that the facts don't support that.
What is up with that shit? Excuse my language, but I'm so over the media always looking for the case, and whatever's before them, they just throw it out there as the case. And I keep using the Columbus, Ohio shooting. It's like, they laid out the verdict on that before people even saw it. And that is, I mean, out of every police encounter you've ever covered, have you ever seen a cleaner shooting?
Then now we're talking about, so everybody understands what we're talking about. We're talking about Micaiah Bryant. So yeah. So and that was it with the knife. No, that was as clean as a shooter as you could find. That's the thing that they run the scenarios. The guy who hits that shot in that scenario, he's like he's a champion. That was number one. You're talking about reaction time. It couldn't have been a better shot.
And there was people on the ground too. I mean, to even have the knowledge and the focus to where to shoot. I mean, he was so on.
Not even that, but the accuracy. The accuracy is off the charts. But think about everything that's going on. You're going to a call of somebody's trying to stab somebody with a knife. You get to the scene. One guy has pushed someone down and is punting this girl's head. So you got a physical assault going on inside. And in front of you, you got somebody trying to literally lunge back and hurt someone. And this guy has to choose now what to start first. Do you stop the assault or do you stop this attempted blah? And he chose to stop the attempted blah. And then you got the concern of, well, hold on, she's on top of this woman and bullets go through people. So you only want to hit her. You don't want to make now two victims, right? Because the victim ain't do nothing. You're trying to stop that person. So shooting her, so you got it. So the shot quality. Yeah, I'm surprised. This guy should get a medal. This guy should literally get a medal. And the news media treated him like he did something wrong. I don't get it. We're living in a bizarre world. Well,
and that's like the women's soccer case. I mean, I know it's not a direct comparison, but I'm just saying it's like,
no, you're right.
I don't like it. It doesn't make me feel good.
No, but
but look at it, read it. Why don't you just step back for 10 minutes, look at Omer and say, oh, you know what? Maybe that's a different case. Maybe we need to find one, because there are cases out there that are legitimate. I'm quite sure. And all this does is it delegitimizes everybody else who's suffering. I mean, let's go to Duke Lacrosse. Same situation, right? It's like that is like the frameable. Oh, I don't like them because they're rich, smug, preppy kids.
Yes.
Okay. But that doesn't make them guilty. Well, maybe being dickheads. I don't know. They could be jerks.
No, but the one thing though is that I in these cases, when you talk about these cases, we got to give our standard disclaimer. Yes, we believe women should be paid equally to men, right? I'm not saying anything controversial, right, Eric?
Equal pay for equal work.
Yes, we believe in that. We believe no matter black, white, whatever, if you're male, women, yes, equal pay for equal work. No doubt about it. We have no issues with that.
Sure.
The issue that we have with this case, with the U.S. women's soccer team case, is if they were doing the same work for the same, doing the same work and not getting the same pay, we would have an issue with that. But it's more complicated than that. And the reason why it's more complicated than that is because when you're negotiating employment contracts, risk is involved. There was a risk for the women, right? The risk was if you lose, you don't get all that money, right? You get like the men, you get less than what you got right now. So they said, we're not going to take the risk of a pay-to-play schedule, right? And you guys don't have to. We're not going to take that risk. We want guaranteed money, right? We want you to guarantee our salary, even if we don't play any games. And U.S. Soccer said, okay, we'll take that deal. Good for U.S. Soccer because the women's national team won everything, right? But it was a good deal for U.S. Soccer because they wanted their money up front. And the men's team said, well, hold on. It's not, we don't want the money up front. We want to gamble. We want to take the risk. And that risk could have been 0 or could be 66 million. That was the range, 0 and 66 million. And last year during the pandemic, they got 0. But the women, they still got paid. So that's what I'm talking about.
And they're complaining.
And they're complaining. Yes. And
which is the irony. But
then when they go to court and the judge says, well, tell me about your case. Yes, we got paid more than the men. Okay. What's the problem? That's the problem. We got paid more, and we should have got paid even more. Oh yeah,
you forgot one element, by the way. You forgot one element. It can't always be equal pay for equal work, because when you're dealing with celebrities or athletes or things like that, you could take 2 basketball players and the superstar who is a better player is practicing the same amount of time as another player, but getting paid more, quite simply because they're producing more.
Yeah.
So, or you could say a musician. one musician is selling more records. They're both playing the same number of concerts, but one gets more money per concert. And that's still fair. I mean, it's not fair, but it is fair because the market is dictating, hey, you're doing better than they are. And that did come into the fact as well. The women did make more in the end. And even with the championships and all that, though, they did not make that much more overall as a team.
No,
it's very, very close.
Yeah, we read the numbers. And the money they brought in, even winning everything, because obviously women's soccer is just not as popular. So even winning everything, they brought in something like I think less than 1% of what the men brought in, or maybe even 2%. It was like the number was just so small. So they won everything and brought in like 2% more in revenue, and the men lost everything and brought in, and almost matched them dollar for dollar. And then when it comes to and then even with that, they got paid a higher percentage of the money they brought in. So they got paid like 4% more than the men, but only brought in like 1% more than the men. It's not like that. So it was off in that way. So the women were doing better in every statistical category, right? Every statistical data, they were doing better. And the problem was that they chose the wrong deal. They didn't bet on themselves. It's a shame, but they just did not bet on themselves.
But Nate, it's just not fair. By the way, Nate, you know the deal. It's News with Booze. What are you drinking? Looks like you're being responsible.
But I'm drinking water now because I got kids running around, and when it comes to me doing live streams, you'll see them coming out at 12:45, and threats will have to be made for dessert tomorrow and things of that nature. Go to bed or no dessert tomorrow.
All right. Well, I'm having High Lie. I had to get trained how to say it. And everybody in the chat, let us know what you're having. And let's jump to the next story because we're talking about athletes. We got a little bit of an Olympic vibe going here. And this one's an interesting story, I think. And it's Google demonetizing Piers Morgan. For criticizing Simone Biles. Now, I want to talk about this in multiple ways because, okay, first off, he's kind of an ass, okay? I'm not going to stand here and say that Piers Morgan is, just the greatest fun dude in the world. He's kind of like a Simon Cowell. He's what do you call that in wrestling? The bad guy or whatever. There's like a term for that.
The heel.
Yeah, he's he's there for the controversy or whatever else. But you're allowed to criticize people. Period. Now, I don't know. What do you think?
Now, you know what? On one end, the legal end, Google has the right. It's their platform. They have the right to do whatever they want, right? Which is whatever. But then, on a business side and just at a moral side, people do have adverse opinions. And the issue that's starting to happen with Google and the rest of these people is that they're only letting one opinion be heard. And when you do that, you don't. It doesn't become a marketplace for ideas. It becomes what they tell you it is. And this is why we just talked about the U.S. women's soccer, that issue, and the marker on the video. And now we're here. They say you can't even hear the fact where somebody can say, well, yeah, but why can't you can't even hear a counterpoint to it. So I think it is starting to
get
a
little dangerous. Daily Mail too, which is so it's going after his actual news source.
Yeah, it just at this point it's like it's not about what's being said. But it's just like if you don't tote the party line, and Google, I think Google and the government has to do something to kind of restrain this because this is starting to go too far. If I know I was at a bar.
If Nate is saying that, because you've been fighting saying this for a while, but it's
I have, but like something like this should not be censored, right? It should not be censored. I don't know any rational person would say something this
question maybe.
On law, no, because it's that free enterprise thing. But I do think this shows why Section 230 kind of has to be reformed in a way. Because this is too much power in the hands of too few, and that's what I think is going on. Because if Piers Morgan can't say, I think she should have toughed it out, and that's banned from Google, then come on, really? Like it's like really.
Yeah. Now, on that note, too, I wanted to talk about it as well, because maybe I feel a little differently.
Mhm.
She stepped out of it because she was having mental health issues. I am not going to question that. And part of the reason I'm not going to question that is that the level of performance to which she performs is far more than we can imagine. And her sport is gymnastics. Her sport, if you're a millimeter off, you break your neck.
Yes.
So you can die, you can be a cripple. It is not one of those that you're just, I don't feel good. Oh, yeah. Whatever the attitude is, there is a very genuine risk factor there. And I think people maybe should consider stepping back. And maybe she was being a jerk, maybe not, whatever. But the point is that I can't really question it. If somebody is in that kind of sport and their mind isn't there, she could die. And then would everybody say, oh, good job, you stuck with it, and you die? Well, how would that help the team?
Yeah, no, it's
probably wouldn't.
It's just like when the quarterback used to get tackled and his bell used to get rung, and he used to be criticized that he sit down and say, well, oh, he's a soft guy. Look at Brett Favre. He never got out of the game. And he said, bell was rung every game. I think it's two things. It's twofold. It's an understanding now of how mental health issues can affect athletes. Sure. And the second thing is that, sometimes it's the greatness of Simone Biles, right? We think we almost consider her to be a superwoman. She's the greatest gymnast of all time. And
I blame the media too on that, because we pumped her up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that had contributed to her mental health issues. It reminded me of the ice skater. Japanese American.
Oh yeah.
God, I can't remember
now because you asked me the name, I can't remember. But I know you're talking about, yeah.
Right. Well, but she was so pumped. It was like the greatest who ever lived, and nobody could ever get her. And come on, chat, bail me out. I know you got it. And then, sure enough, she failed in the event, and we've seen that with some skiers. And athlete after athlete, it's like we love to build them up, and then when they fall
Naomi
short,
Osaka.
Okay.
Naomi Osaka.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if that's right, but okay, whatever. It doesn't sound right. But anyway.
She dropped out because she had mental health issues of Wimbledon,
right? No. It was another one. She actually competed, but she wound up in like third.
Oh, no, she withdrew from Wimbledon because of mental health issues. Number 2, Naomi.
Here it is. Chrissy Yamaguchi.
Oh, you're talking about Chrissy. Oh, you're talking about for figure skating. You're not talking about tennis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that. Sorry.
All right. I thought you were talking about tennis.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. No. I was talking about figure skating. I thought I said ice skating. But yeah, anyway, yeah. The point is that well played. It's not a legal channel, but there you go. All we know is Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding.
Yes.
Oh, love it. Anyway, yeah, you build them up, and then it's really difficult. So I feel like everything was riding on her, and then the Olympics aren't doing very well anyway. Shocking. Mm-hmm. Now that one I do blame on athletes. It's like, really, can you just hold back for a minute? I think that somebody brought up a really valid point, that of course the men's basketball team lost. If you're ashamed of your country, you're not only playing for yourself, you're playing for the country. So if you're ashamed of yourself, are you going to really step up? Somebody made the joke that, hey, they don't want to keep taking the knee. That's one way to stop, right?
To lose. I don't know. It's when I don't know, because there's been a lot of great athletes that have won.
Muhammad Ali did.
Yeah, that won and celebrate. And I think that's the greatness of America, right? That we can protest. Because I don't think our freedom is shown in our nationalism all the time. I think it is shown in the way we allow citizens to protest, right? To say, hey, I live in a effed up country, and they can go back and say it, and they're free to say it, right? That freedom, you don't have that freedom in North Korea. You don't have that freedom in North Korea. And don't get me wrong, maybe there may be some I think maybe there may be some emotional piece to it, because I think you're right. I do think, you know, fighting for a country I love is different than fighting for a country I have some disdain for. But I do think when you step up to that podium and you jump, or you're about to swim or run or do whatever needs to be done, I'm thinking those people are giving their best effort possible. But then on the other end, I don't know. I'd rather see all the athletes, like the wrestler. When I saw the wrestler, I was like, that made me smile. That made me smile to see how much he loved their country. Because that's me. That's like, yeah, you know, I did this for the United States of America, and it was good to see. And it's weird because I think the sad part about that video is how good it was to see. You know, why don't I see why did I have to see that on the clip? Why wasn't that front page news? You know, it was like it was being brought up in the right-wing media, but the left-wing media really, you know, they weren't pumping it up until it became a too big a story to hold back. And I think we need to see more of that. I think we need to see the Americans who aren't taking these, who are happy with what's happening here, because, you know, we shouldn't only be showing one side of the story. We should show other people, because the fact that, like, for instance, there's some women on the U.S. women's national team who didn't take a knee, right? Who don't take a knee, but they are not. They're not racist. They're not saying that. They're just saying that they don't want to take a knee because it's too important to them. And that's what I'm talking about. There are two sides to the story, and the media's only ever been showing us one side.
Well, it's true. And I mean, maybe I'm old, you know, obviously I'm an Xer, but I remember Miracle on Ice. And that
1980,
was oh my God, that was so impactful. It is, you know, that was the Olympics for us, seared into one. It's like, if I never watch another Olympics again, that moment was so powerful.
Do you believe it?
So unbelievable.
And then they had to come back and win the gold, right? And the gold medal game too.
Yeah, I mean, that was just amazing. Okay, somebody said, putting out, also in China, when people booed in Hong Kong the national anthem of China, they would get arrested for disrespecting.
Yeah.
So,
see, it's, you know, like me, you know, I don't know, maybe again, sometimes I just love this country too damn much. But I really think this is, like, when I say it, and you know what? It's funny because sometimes I think even today, like when I'll say it on Twitter. You know, America's the greatest country on earth. Prove me wrong, right? I would be anywhere else in the world. And it's almost like if you say that, you're a white nationalist or something. You know, like you're racist against the country. It's like, what are you talking about? Why can't I love America and not have to be with all these labels, right? The reason why I can tell you is the same reason you can march in the streets against what you don't like. It's the same reason I love America, to say I love America. You know what I'm saying? The rights don't, it's not only what you want to say, but it's also what I want to say and how I want to feel and how I want to express myself. And I shouldn't be shamed into saying it. It's a shame that nowadays it's something like you can't, like, you know, if I throw an American flag on my truck, people looking sideways on you, like you're that much Mr. America? Yeah, hell yeah, I am.
All right, here we go. So somebody's going to bring it up. Okay, so we can get in deeper here. Thoughts on Laurel Hubbard? I don't agree with it at all. I'm completely against it. New Zealand heavyweight trans.
If she competed in the
women's, yeah.
So you know what?
Yeah. No way. Sorry.
I don't know what happened there. Was it just like, because I know in some situations, like with Joe Rogan, when he talks about the MMA fighters, where he had the guy and it was, you know, just and then it was like brutalized. Like what happened with this? Was this somebody who was on medication? Like what happened?
Well, it's a trans male to female, and let's see. Oh, good. She failed to finish. All right, interesting. She's the one that was smashing like every record. Whatever was
whatever
in the world, and apparently she failed to finish, and that may be an encouraging thing. I personally do not care for the idea of especially males to females in sports, especially strength sports. Lifting is a strength sport.
Yeah,
and I'm a runner. I don't look like it right now, but you know, if you get caught for doing testosterone and things like that, you can get banned for life. Now, why?
Yeah.
Well, the truth is
unfair advantage.
Well, and you still carry the advantage. Even when you stop tomorrow, you've still built up all the muscles, all the bone structure, everything else.
From puberty.
So when you're talking about a male to female, you're talking about somebody who's been effectively doping for however many years they were a male. And then suddenly saying, okay, they're no longer doping. That's
building up all that muscle mass
bone structure
stuff.
is still there. The leverage is still there. These things are still there.
Men carry their center of gravity over their shoulders to make us more mobile, when women are more in their hips. So if you somebody developed as a man, then they'll have that advantage over women. And you'd also have a natural strength advantage. Yeah, no, I agree. I know there was a case in I think it's Massachusetts, where there were two young men who started identifying as women, and for the men's team they were like number 5th and 6th, and then they ran with the women and broke all the white records in the state for women's athlete sports. And then some women athletes sued the state saying, no, this is unfair. They're just men who are saying they're women, and that's the reason why you had to, and there were scholarships, for instance, at risk. So no, I agree with you.
Well, that's the other thing is Title IX. You can just chuck it.
Yeah, see, I agree with I agree with you in principle. I don't think you can have male trans male athletes competing with women. The transition from from female to male. I mean, from male to female. Without telling me some science behind it, saying, well, listen, this is why the person will have the advantages, or by giving them this, maybe there's some medication out there that'll counteract that natural advantage of just being a man. I'm not up on the science, but
how often have you seen it go the other way? I'm very simplistic.
I don't know. I've never seen
out there competing in the NFL. How many females to males are out there competing against men? So
I've
that's all I'm saying.
I've never heard it.
Well, that's my point. So if there's no difference, then we should be seeing both directions. Boom, boom. Okay, it's all there, but it's just not.
Well,
and I think
there may be, and I'm playing devil's advocate. There may be, it may be easier to suppress someone's physical ability than to enhance it, right? Like, to enhance it, for instance, from female to male may take, a more, because like you're saying, testosterone and all that stuff over years of training, but going the other way to suppress those advantages, it may be easier, you take things that less bone density or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm just saying that there may be a medical reason to it, but I agree with you. I think this is a problem. But then I would throw the question back at you. What should you do with these people who do want to compete, who are in this situation? Should they not be allowed to compete, or should you have a third category or something like that?
Third category. I'd say a third category, or it's just life's not fair. I'm sorry how you're born. It's the same way. Like Oscar Pistorius, the Blade Runner. Remember there were problems with his equipment. He had his legs cut off. That's not fair. But if he's got an enhancement because of that, then is that fair to compete with against others? So I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
I look. I want to be in the NBA. Not everybody can do everything, and I understand that. I'm not trying to hold anybody back. So either have a third league, or I'm sorry, I just don't do it. Not everybody's able to do it.
It's interesting, and I got to figure out if this is true or not. But somebody challenged me with this today. They said, as we have it right now, none of the men's leagues are actually discriminating against women. It's the opposite way around. Think about this.
Sure.
If there was a woman who could compete in the NBA at the high level, right, who can get a rotation spot in the NBA, do you think that she wouldn't be in the NBA? Do you think that if she practiced well as the men, do you think that in today's age she wouldn't be able to get on an NBA team?
Absolutely she would. I mean, weren't there, I don't know if this is true or not, but I thought there was an NFL possibility, or at least of a female
kicker
playing in the NFL as a kicker,
as a place kicker. Exactly.
Can compete and can do it. If they can do it, yeah.
So there's no barrier for them to get into it other than performance. But the other way around is not true. A male can't go into a women's league and then compete, right? It would be forbidden, right? It's actually, you can't go that way because of the natural enhancement, because of the because men are just naturally stronger and faster. And what I mean to say by that is that we recognize there is this difference, and if we want to keep and by recognizing these differences, by having these two different leagues, by having things separated like this, the problem is that I think what you're saying, when you're having people going back and forth from these two pots, it does bring in this competitive thing. And I don't know if science has fixed it, but I do hold your concerns. I think your concerns are valid, and I think you make a powerful argument. Sometimes there is just no answer. So.
Yeah, I know somebody is bringing this up. Okay, I don't know the case. I guess Chris Chan is a YouTuber, trans, who was arrested for a really awful crime that involves relations with the mother of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way I can put it. I don't know how to get around YouTube.
But don't worry about it. It's some horrible thing. All right.
Okay. So if this person was sent to a women's jail, I have giant problems with it on all counts. I mean, one, I do question the idea if everything is operational, technically, mixing things up. But two, if the person is going in for doing something with female, then that's implying that, well, I don't know. It just it doesn't feel quite right to me. Now, I guess someone could say, well, what if it's a gay female? And you could throw that back at me. I don't know, but it seems like the person was acting in a deviant but heterosexual manner.
Well,
with their crime.
I'll tell you this. When I've experienced this problem a couple of times with arrests that I've had, and one time we arrested.
I'm yellow yet. I've got to be.
Oh, sorry. We arrested someone who we believe to be a male. We arrested the person for a burglary, so we believe the person was a male. We had the person on camera. The person had been back and forth a couple of times. Arrest was good. We take the person down, process the person. The person says, we even at the question, I think we asked the question one time, male, female, but we just asked it pro forma because it was just something to ask. The person said male, and then we just kept it. And everything else was male. We didn't even ask the person again. Put them in the male jail cell before we took them to central booking. We took them to central booking, right? Put the person in the cell. They get searched by us, corrections. The person's gone, right? Arrested. 2 days later, we get a call. That guy happened to be a woman. And when that guy went to the cell with all of the guys, that guy had to tell somebody that, hey, you got me in the wrong cell. I need to be with the women. So I think when it comes to the criminal justice system, things tend to work themselves out usually when it comes, because it gets real at that particular point in time. Going the opposite,
this is the case of somebody claiming
going the opposite way. Yes, going the opposite way. Now, generally, from what I've seen, I remember earlier on, they would still, if the person looked masculine, they would put them with the men. Sometimes they may put them with the women. It was kind of dicey for a little while here. But again, I don't know what they do now. Maybe they just have enough room where they can put, where they can segregate people, whether they're trans or not. But from my experience, usually you have to go into one, there's a male piece of it, there's a female piece of it, and there's multiple other cells there too. So, they may be able to segregate it, but I just don't know.
And by the way, we interrupt this broadcast because, of course.
How often does it go yellow for you on tonight's show?
Oh, just about every news with booze. It's probably been that way for a while. I'm sitting here going along, having a good conversation, everything else. It's like, oh yeah, I better go check. Oh, of course. I'll do the chink Uyghur or whatever. Of course, of course.
It's so funny. I never knew how much misinformation TYT. I've been having to do some real bullshit.
Any day that ends with the Y, they're full of shit, man.
Yeah, that's true. I've been so ashamed of myself because just watching the mainstream, I've been absorbing so much BS, and I just thought it was real, and then now just questioning just everything, and it's tough because it's funny because I think that's one thing that's caused, hopefully by 100,000 subs soon. But I'm thinking that
did you get them yet?
No, I'm there. I'm close. I'm thinking I'm at 99,000, something like that.
Oh yeah,
I'm at 99,469.
Damn, dude. Come on,
pretty close.
Come on, get it tonight. You're getting it tonight.
Hopefully. But it's funny because I think that's what people have been craving so much. Just giving people the facts, unemotional, is something that's so rare in the thing that it's like I've appeared in a gold mine. Just like, here are the facts. What do you think? And it's like, yo, that's it's pretty rare. Yeah. And I say, tell me what you think.
What I think you're finding is, I've talked about this a bunch. I don't know if I have with you, but Gelman amnesia or Gelman amnesia. Have you ever heard of that?
You explained it to me. Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Michael Crichton actually came up with it. The guy who did Jurassic Park. He was a doctor and really smart dude beside. But he named it after his friend Murray Gell-Mann, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And he describes it as a phenomenon where if you know something about a field, a profession, whatever it might be, and the media reports on it, you look at it, you're like, that's bullshit. They don't know no, it's not like that. They don't know what they're talking about. And then you read another article that's about something you don't know, and you're like, wait a minute, that's messed up. And you just go right along with it because you have this amnesia, not realizing that, look, if the thing that you do know about, they're wrong on, then who's to say that they're not wrong on every other thing that you don't know?
Yeah.
And that's the amnesia. And, like you with your women's soccer team, you're watching the media carry water. And you cannot help but look at that. You're even seeing the case as it's decided. And they double down, right? It's a case of, hey, this court unreasonably decided. Or whatever. It's like, we just cannot accept it. So we're just going to keep it out there. It was actually brought up Duke Lacrosse, right?
Yeah, Duke Lacrosse is a classic example.
That's used in comedy clubs, right? A lot of comedians would be whatever. They would see like four white guys, preppies or whatever. Yeah, you look like the Duke Lacrosse team. What do you mean by that? You mean you look like four innocent fellows? That's what
they were innocent. Yeah, they were 100% innocent. You're right.
Exactly. But there you go. So what? Now you have effectively stained their name for life.
Forever.
This team is forever stained. They're completely not guilty, and the retraction, if there ever is one, is always behind, at least under the fold, but usually many pages in. It's like, never mind. We'll just say that you did this and this and this and this. It'll stick with you forever, ruin your reputation. We'll stick with it. So,
but two things though about the Duke Lacrosse team. Obviously, it was total fabricated. It was found out, and the prosecutor actually went to jail from that case because he withheld evidence. So that show you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. You withheld Broady material.
Guess who never apologized?
He never apologized. Oh, Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace was another one. Yeah, she was ringing it big time.
Yeah, shit.
But one thing with the Duke Lacrosse case is that the saving grace is that they got paid because they had their defamation suit, which was clearly defamation. And second is that no one knows any of those people's names. You can go look it up, but it's not like because
it's
time
great that it's Duke Lacrosse. Yeah, you're right. It's great that it's the team.
Yeah. Time has healed that one where it's not, this guy, it's Duke Lacrosse, and those players now, if you're hanging out with those guys every day, you probably won't even know it was them. So, hopefully that has given them some consolence, but it's still horrible to have your name attached to something like that. You're definitely right.
And you were right. They're fortunate that there's an umbrella term that is, comes to mind first. Covington Kids is another good example.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let that go. And Nick Sandman, though, his name is a little bit more tied with it.
But it's more of and I think a hero's name because he got paid, and that type of thing. So I think his story.
Hold on. He got paid, but then he was even prevented from going to a school.
Oh wow.
So no, don't play that. It's like, okay, so he gets a check. The guy should be able to lead a life without having the whole, oh, well, he got paid. Oh, he had that overcome. He tries to get a school, and maybe he got it. I don't know, but they were fighting his entering the school after he got paid.
Oh, so after the case was over.
Oh,
wow,
God, yeah.
That's horrible. But he was fed. But the story was BS though. Why would anybody try?
Because they want to. Because how many people turn
That's
around?
Horrible.
And said,
That's horrible.
Oh, we were wrong with our tweets. We were wrong calling on bad things to happen to them.
Wow.
A lot of them did not. Yes, there were some stand-up people, and kudos. Every one of them said, okay, you know what? I put that out. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I'll be stupid tomorrow. But at least they stepped up and said something. But there are many who never apologized, never took it down. I think that Pocahontas never took anything down.
Well, she's out there still screaming that, the U.S. women's soccer team is getting paid less than.
Oh, well, shocking, right?
Yeah,
because
so.
Never. Now, and by the way, I'm going to throw a small amount of praise on somebody, which I don't necessarily want to, but I need to always point out. There is a case of police violence against a white guy right now, and Al Sharpton spoke at the funeral and has been taking it on. And I have to step back and go, okay, good on you. Because I argue that it's not about race, it's about police violence. And if there is excessive violence, it needs to be looked at, and that's regardless. Families suffer whatever their color is. Blood is blood. And that one, it's like, okay, I never thought I'd say Al Sharpton did anything halfway decent, but broken clocks. He did show up. He seems to be taking it on, and I think he's actually going to help his own cause even more by doing that. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes we fixate on what we disagree with, but then we forget that we all live in a world where most of us agree on most things. Right, most of us are against police violence. Sure. Most of us believe in police accountability. The ends we all agree with. It's just the means on how we get there, and I think those are the things that divide us. But I think even in the Al Sharpton case, I think when there was, well, even let me go back in when Obama was president, there was Donald Trump, President Obama, Al Sharpton, and Newt Gingrich, and Sean Hannity. There was one topic they all advocated for, and they all agreed to. Al Sharpton and Newt Gingrich was going around the country, right, together, advocating for this position. Do you know what position that was?
I was thinking the crime bill, but
nope. Charter schools.
Oh, well, that's a good position.
School choice.
Sure.
Al Sharpton, Barack Obama, Newt Gingrich, they all agreed with that position. People should have choice to go whatever. If they want to parents want to go to a private school, they should be able to take their tax dollars to the private school. All of them agreed to it. It never got done because obviously Democratic machine, the school teachers, they started paying pockets.
I mean, unions are a critical part of the machine, and
it wasn't going nowhere.
I mean,
but when you have a situation, so that's so it's so when I see something like that, it always reminds me that that I think we all agree on a lot of the things. Like one of the things that I do find myself is that when I start looking at things from the conservative point of view, I find I agree with a lot of those points, right? And then when I look at some things from the liberal view, I say, okay, there's certain things, but it's never the whole box of caboodles. But I think now we've gotten so polarized where if I don't believe in every single issue the way you believe in every single issue, then I'm not on your side. Like, for instance, when I tell my liberal friends I'm two-way all the way, I'm not really liberal. When I tell my conservative people, hey, I'm for a woman's right to choose, you're not really conservative. But then when we talk about two-way issues, I'm with you all the way. You know what I'm saying? So I think I think it's more a la carte on issues. I judge each issue independently than just trying to take a position. I'm conservative with all these things. You know what I'm saying?
Right. What we should say is that we're going to invite Nate to our specific marches that we know he'll be in on. In other words, you just leave the invite and forget to tell him.
That's true. We're like, hold on, weren't you here last week?
What?
Yeah, but I think most of us, are like that. I think Chris Rock said it best. He was like, if we're talking about prostitution, I'm a little more liberal. We're talking about violence, armed robberies, I'm a little bit more conservative, lock them up. So I think most of us are like that. I think we get locked into these political positions because of politics. Like, it's funny because someone was telling me the other day, they were saying tell me the worst thing you think someone can do. I'm talking about, let's think about, plagiarizing. Let's talk about lying. Let's talk about stealing other people's speeches.
Hey,
right?
Yeah. You
and
can do what
talking about
be president.
And you know what I'm talking about? Joe Biden. Yeah. Think about some of the worst things, locking up black people, right? Calling them predators. The worst thing you can talk about a conservative could do today. I'll show you. Be against school busing for black children, right? Joe Biden was on the opposite side of those issues, and he's president today. So that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, he was, but okay, but on the crime bill, I will point something out though. Do you know who was demanding the crime bill more than anyone else?
Oh, hold on. Let me tell you how. Let me tell you exactly who was demanding it. It was the black clergyman in Harlem. Let me explain to you how the crime bill happened so people understand. Crack hit the black neighborhood hard. I mean, like a rock.
All of them.
Yes, it was like a rock. And the reason why is cocaine was an upper class drug. You had to spend cash to get cocaine. It wasn't cheap to get. But when they were able to turn cocaine into crack, it killed the price. The price would drop dramatically. And obviously, you had the iron contract.
Hold on. I'm going to push back. I know you
go ahead. No,
the price is a factor, but what really got it in there was a better distribution model.
Yes,
and
definitely.
I'm finding that out now because, there's plenty of Rust Belt neighborhoods with plenty of poor white people that could not afford cocaine either that could get in it, but they didn't have the distribution getting to them for the crack. The CIA facilitated the pipeline
because of the Iran-Contra.
Central LA.
Yeah.
No, this is all true. I mean, it's just factual.
Hold on. But because I want to make sure people understand that pipeline facilitated by the CIA going into South Central LA was because of the Iran-Contra. They were trying. They were the United States government. Yeah, the United States government was funding Iran-Contra by selling guns and stuff in Nicaragua and having those funds. They were benefiting off the cocaine trade.
Absolutely, they were. And it's Freeway Rick Ross,
yeah,
brought it into LA. The Crips and the Bloods were nobody before that point.
Yes,
barely heard of. That spread out, and they said, okay, and it became so saturated that they'd have dealers like on every corner, and they're like, well, this isn't going to fly. We need to take our business on the road. And where did they go? They went to other black communities. This is why it hit the black communities more than anyone. It might have caught everybody else up too, but it hit blacks harder than anything just because that's where it came in. That's where it's facilitated.
Yes.
And it was cheap. Everything was perfectly lined up for a nice market.
Yes. And plus, and then when they started doing the flying it in into Miami from the Cocaine Cowboy days and all that stuff, and they really started having that distribution up the pipeline, it just exploded because then you had so much product in where the price just dropped naturally because of supply and demand. So when crack cocaine hit, for instance, the precinct in New York City that I lived in was the smallest precinct in the city. It was the smallest precinct in the city. It was in Harlem. And that precinct had the highest amount of murders in that precinct.
I wonder why it was the smallest, Nate. You ever think there might be a parallel there?
Oh. No, but we were next to like no one who's the biggest. It was so black though too. Yeah.
You were gonna grow at that rate, dude. By the way, super chat, and everybody, thank you so much for any super chats and things. As you can see, I barely get anything. It's demonetized every time. So it's like, this and locals, of course. It's a cancellation of those they don't like. They call the organization still the company organization complies with their demands. Yes, I can't stand cancel culture. I think that's talking about Piers Morgan and another story I'll be bringing up here, which is Sky News.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah.
Suspended from YouTube.
But let me
Horrible.
finish this. Let me finish this point before I forget about the crack epidemic. One thing I think a lot of people don't realize with the crack epidemic was that when it got so bad and we had so many murders out there in Harlem, I'm talking about people just getting robbed randomly. It became so bad that people were afraid to leave their homes in the inner city. And I always tell people, if you want to see how bad it is, go look at the progression of Sesame Street, because Sesame Street, they used to film the neighborhood children playing for their, sunny days. And look how it was in the 70s and 80s. Look how much garbage and how messed up all the playgrounds were back then. And this was Sesame Street. Remember, this was something that was televised on TV. Right. But the black preachers and everything in Harlem started saying, well, listen, you guys, because we had a congressional delegation, and we were like, you guys need to start doing something. We need to lock these people up because this is ridiculous. And they were advocating Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, lock these people, lock them up.
President. Yeah, our first black president.
Yes.
They had a very strong influence on Clinton.
Yes, and even Charlie Rangel, the congressman, he was a long-term congressman from New York, said yes, he advocated for the crime bill and told them to lock them up, and he said it was a good thing. So that's exactly that's what happened. So I do understand people saying, well, they're racist. No, it was black people who advocated for this crime bill and said, but the thing is that I think also you have to understand the back end of that too, because then you have an enforcement problem. Because just because they advocated for it, no, I don't think anyone can justify the enforcement model for the crack cocaine distinction in the federal thing. Where, think about this, in Los Angeles County, LA County, out of what percentage of arrests do you think were made back in the 90s? Well, what do you think the percentage was of black people and white people being arrested for crack cocaine violations at the height of the crack epidemic in LA County?
If you're talking about crack, it would be like 90% to 10% or more, because the whites weren't really doing crack much. They were straight coke. If you were doing versus crack comparison of rich white people doing cocaine and getting away with it versus the crack, yeah, that's all true.
Well, but I'm going to say no for two reasons. Number one, there were more people using crack cocaine in that county than it was white people than black people were using crack cocaine because it was a cheaper drug. And you had more, and I don't know if there are just more poor white people than there are black people, just as an aggregate. So, because black people are only 13% of the population. So there are more poor white people were using crack cocaine. So there were more actually white people using the drug in LA County than black people. But at the time frame, there was not a single white person convicted of any of the cocaine crimes on the federal level. And that's where I think people miss the enforcement model of it, where you can say, okay, well, the piece, black people did advocate for this change in the law, but the enforcement, there's something wrong with the enforcement, because you can't tell me that whites and blacks use the drug equally, but absolutely no white person's convicted of using crack cocaine. And that just doesn't make any sense, but that shows the enforcement model.
Okay, but then this is where I agree with Dr. Wood or Michael Wood on this, is he points out that, okay, well, that's a racist outcome. You don't like, but if you create a system, don't complain about your outcome.
Yeah, I agree.
He uses another place you've lived. Baltimore is a perfect example. That is a very racist outcome, which happens to be the entire chain of command and the police is black. All the way to mayor. Every freaking part, all the way up and down, 100% black. So the enforcement was demanded by these communities, and the system was built in such a manner because they were cracking down their own neighborhoods. I mean, do you think the clergy in Harlem were worried about Manhattan?
No, well, Lower Manhattan. No. I'm 110% agreeing with you. These laws were made to target certain areas of the population, but I think on one end we can't be blind to the outcome, right? When you're talking about law enforcement and you talk about 0 versus 100, that's an outcome where I don't think anyone can say, there's a reason for that. Now there could be some disparities, fine, but 100% to 0, I think that it's an extreme enough example where I think, Now we're talking about how these laws are being enforced, especially now knowing that, you had the same amount of usage no matter what. And you're right. I think it was because people in their own communities were advocating for those arrests, to lock on and throw away the key. That was the motto in the African-American community. So I think it was a combination of things. I think it was a combination of, Democrats wanting to help Black people in their neighborhoods, because that was the model. The model back then was that the cops were racist because they weren't making these arrests. The cops were racist because you can't see cops in poor neighborhoods, right? It was the exact opposite of what we hear today. Instead of being more cops, they were arguing that we need more cops in the neighborhood. There are no cops. Defund the police. They were like, we need more money. We need more police. And now that shifted to now we've got too much police. So that's what I want to say. It's funny how history has a way of twisting itself into these knots, where the same community 20 years ago was saying more police, more help, more this. And then 20 years later, we're saying the exact opposite.
Well, I get to a point, but I mean, okay, I don't live there, so I can't say, necessarily whatever. But, if you look at the early 70s, you brought up Sesame Street. Look at what we're seeing about San Francisco right now. And you had Dirty Harry.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to enter Dirty Harry time again. There, it's horrible.
Yeah. And
I mean, I don't think the footage is all wrong. I mean, there's a reason the Walgreens are shutting down. There's a reason they're showing the footage of people literally just grabbing things off the shelf, scrape, throwing it in a cart and walking out the door, running out the door. I mean, and you have, I don't even know what you want to call them, because I don't think they deserve the title of any kind of law enforcement or DA or whatever when they're saying that, oh, it's not a crime if it's under $1,000. Then now you're just saying, okay, good, steal up to 1,000.
Yeah. I don't agree with that. I think just, well, because I know here if it's under $1,000, it's a misdemeanor, so it's not over $1,000. It's a felony. So, and most of those misdemeanors plead out anyway too. So you're right. I agree. I just think we definitely need to figure out, and I think the cocaine crack distinction should be done.
Yeah, Dr. Wood is here. He had to pipe up. And thank you, Unclassified Names, again. Yes, yes, that is a really solid point. I'm a big believer in ignoring the sunk cost fallacy. That, we've thrown all this into this system or that system, and we've spent all this money, made all this investment. If it's broke, it's broke.
Yeah,
it's kind of like if we can actually get out of Afghanistan, get out of Afghanistan. I don't care who's doing it. I know we've spent trillions. That doesn't mean spend trillions more. It's like at some point you just say, okay, you know what, this isn't working. We gave it our all. Let's do something else. So I totally agree with that. And I think we have a bad issue with that. And while we're talking about what is it, my sexist ways, as he put it, let's get into a fine, upstanding person. Now, remember, in 2020, there were two just dynamic personalities, amazing. They needed to run for president. These people were so great.
Joe Exotic.
Avenatti and the governor of your state.
I thought you were going to go with Joe not Avenatti, Joe Exotic from the Tiger King.
Oh, no. He's classier than these. But no, remember that Avenatti. I mean, how often did you hear that? They were like, "Oh, he should run. He should do this. He should." And then, of course, it's like while people are dying in nursing homes, you had coma going out every day, and they were like, "Now that's a leader." Oh, and they made such a point of it. They were cutting away from Trump's speeches of the president, whatever you think,
for Cuomo,
the president's speeches for the governor of New York, because we like him. He's doing everything correctly. He's following all the standards. Remember that? I mean, I'm like, more people are dying in New York than anywhere in the freaking country. And this is per capita. It's not just population. It's per capita, because Florida was just kicking your ass in terms of numbers. But he was a darling. And by the way, that's why these sexual harassment charges are sticking. Because they have to have the charges on him. This is all me in my head, but I feel that burn him on the sexual harassment because we cannot burn him on the other because we celebrated that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a firm believer in that we can compartmentalize certain things. Like I think, with what happened with the nursing homes, I think that was ridiculous. I think it's always bad policies to send people back with COVID, and those nursing homes, no matter what anybody thinks, they felt they had no choice, and they tried to do what they could, and people died. Yes, that was a horrible mistake. He should have been investigated for it, for what they did. And I also think too that the sexual harassment thing, I think he's done. I think he should be done, because it's just at a point, leadership, when you're trying to lead a state, it's not about what you can do, because no man leads alone. It's what you can convince other people to do for you.
Are you
right?
in traction, or can you move?
Yeah. If can you, because he still got to sign bills, get people together, push an agenda, lead people and tell people what to do. And if people don't have confidence in you, then no matter what your title is, you just can't lead. So I think that's over for him. Yeah. But now about I know about COVID. I know this is always an interesting piece of it, because I remember, and again, the only reason why I know this is because I read Dr. Burke. She put out like the CDC guidance on this, and she was explaining how the numbers were at the beginning of the pandemic. And one of the key points that she said was that you have to think about it as seeds, like where the virus hit first and where it hit second. And obviously the virus, and they predicted the virus in New York actually came in earlier than it came when the first known case in Washington. And it was already here germinating. So by time we caught it, it was already exploding, versus, Florida had time where the virus was now on the radar, and now you can deal with it in Florida because it happened later on in the cycle, where in New York, the virus is already happening.
I'm going to call bullshit on that, because the travel going into Florida, especially of the varied, is equal, if not more, to New York.
But it's coming from different places, though, right? They're coming from.
No, I'm saying, Orlando wasn't like a hot spot, which it damn sure should have been, because everybody going in there. So,
but the virus doesn't hit. You agree the virus that comes from one place? Are you saying it hits the whole United States all at the same time, or like Dr. Burke said in her paper, you can see that it hit different? Like the first case looked like it came in New York 2 weeks before it came in Florida, or 2 or 3 weeks before it hit in Alabama, right? Not every place got the virus at the same time, right? And then
even then, the height of the numbers still never added up. So,
well, yeah, because you
start 2 weeks earlier. Okay, so now let's just shift it say, okay, starts here. We'll shift the timeline and say that this is 2 weeks earlier. So let's look at the overall numbers and percentages.
All right. So let's do that. So now you have a virus that no one knows is here, that hits 2 weeks earlier. Then you get wind that, hey, there's a virus, because remember, the virus was so bad in New York, and people hadn't gotten sick in Florida, or it hadn't been found in Florida. And Florida actually had a travel ban from New York, right? They were stopping people at the border, saying, if you're from New York, you had to quarantine because the virus was so bad in New York. And then later on, remember, because it was a big thing on the news where DeSantis was like, oh, they kept saying we're going to be like New York, we're going to be like New York. And then eventually they did become like New York, because when you think about these viruses, it happens at certain locations, but there's a time factor. That's why New York exploded early and then went down. And then when Florida, which was a little later down the line, they exploded later, and then they went down. So it's not like it. The point would be made if all the locations got hit at the same time, but we know locations spiked at certain times and went down. And I think New York just got hit earlier than Florida, but Florida got hit later, and that's why at one point Florida had tremendous numbers, while New York had no numbers. But it's just hard to compare at that particular time. You know what I mean?
So we have to take all of it in consideration.
Yeah.
And you have other factors too, like New York locked down far more than Florida. Florida's been open like a good majority of the time. So obviously with a risky behavior, they should be higher. They're not.
Well, they were at a certain point in time. And plus, don't forget too, you're also talking about population density, because we are talking about a transmissible disease. For instance, you have New York City, for instance, you have like 2 million people on 11.5 square miles of land. Manhattan, right? You have 2 million people on 11.5 square miles of land. They're in close quarters. We build our buildings up because we don't have any land. So that's why we put everybody in and up. With Florida, you do have that line. You do have that space. People aren't on top of each other. If you ever go to the transit system here, and you shove 200 people into a train car and you're shoulder to shoulder, everybody's breathing the same air, you got a very, very high transmissibility rate than you would in Florida. Florida doesn't have any public safety system, a public transportation system like New York, right? They're not putting everybody on trains down there.
Well, I'll throw another thing into the works for you. That'll stir it up. I would argue New York on that compression and temperature and lack of humidity because of it. Now, where I'm going with this, because I had an emergency room doctor on, and it was fascinating, but he said it's the weather, stupid. Now, outside of New York, so let's take New York and Florida out of the equation just for a second. Where was the virus most hard hitting? Nursing homes and meatpacking plants.
Yes.
What do these have in common? People in small areas with either heat or, in the case of meatpacking plants, cool, and in air conditioning is very dry. Both are in cool, dry areas. Now, a virus can travel much farther in dry air than humid air, because if you breathe out, think about it, the more moist the air is, the more it's going to catch on to droplets and fall.
Okay.
Just gravity. Well, New York, it's a lot colder in New York than Florida. So Florida, even though people are home or whatever, A, there's more humidity, B, they're outside a whole lot more. But if you lock everybody into a building, you have a bunch of dry heat running around in the building, you're like compressing and making a little incubator. And this is already held up, because in the Spanish flu, at one point they are so desperate because they were so overcrowded with patients at a couple hospitals. They just said, you know what, they're probably going to die. Nothing you can do about this. They took their cots all outside, and they started to recover.
Well, maybe I don't know. Look, like, well, New York obviously has a dynamic thing, and you see it sometimes it's 90 degrees, and other times it's below zero. So it has a dynamic. But look at the picture of the subway, what I'm talking about, because obviously we're talking about breathing in and out and droplets going 6 feet. This is all, scientifically proved that when you breathe out, it breathes out 6 feet, right? So this is the L train. Now the 4, 5, and 6 train, before they produced, was kind of like this during rush hour, was packed like this. So you're talking about one person here, who's infected, has a possibility. You're talking about the virus can transmit up to 6 feet, right? This is, this is the environment that I don't think you can have in Florida, right? People aren't packed on the trains like this in Florida. And
have you been?
How many? And we're talking about 1.2 million people take these trips a day on the subway system. And we're not even talking about droplets on surfaces, because that also affects people too. Droplets on surfaces, can last for 1 or 2 days or something like that. So, if you're talking about that many people and then droplets and all that, it just I don't.
A lot of the surface stuff has been contradicted over time. There's been a lot more studies, and I know because like my wife is a librarian, and there were studies here like, oh, you can't have it on paper, and she had a cycle for the 48 hours and all that. Then they came back and they said, no, it's not holding up. So the surface contact and stuff, a lot of that was not actually true. You were correct about, obviously, more people you have, the more transmission it's going to be. But I'm saying it's compounded by a much colder environment, and yes, much more crowded environment.
Well, because then don't forget, when did it hit? It hit April. So even if I accept the cold environment thing, April, May, June, July, that's the warm, those are the warm months in New York. And that's when the virus is most prevalent here. So, even that would show you why you had such a surge, because again, like you're saying, it was just warmer here. So you're right. You probably are right.
Yeah. And, but also you said, okay, lock everybody in. So
ironically,
if you walk around outside more, they'd be probably less exposure.
I don't know, because again, with the subways closed and everything, because that was the thing. You wanted to keep people away from each other. Do you lock everybody in? I'm just glad I didn't have to make those decisions, because don't forget, when Trump's team made those decisions, their model, and the modeling showed that something like 2 or 3.3 million people could have died. And Trump said that the model, and the models were good. The models were saying, this is the infection rate, this is how things work, this is how we believe it's transmitted. And then you started seeing the numbers happen. So, I think Trump made the right decision when they locked it down, and I think he made the right decision when he opened it up. He followed the science to a certain degree, but I think when he made his decisions to do what he did, when he made the decision to invest billions in the vaccine, I think that was the right decision. And I think Trump doesn't get as much credit for what he did to warp speed for the vaccine. I think where we're at now because of that policy, right? And I think everybody could agree with that, except if you're a liberal, you probably say it's BS, but it's true.
Oh, Kamala said she would. No, anyway. Well, he was also correct. He locked down flights from China very early on.
Yeah, and they called him racist for that. And, but it just made sense. If I know I got a very infectious virus coming from China, why do I want people coming in from China? But again, I think that's the politics of it, because again, sometimes Democrats, they follow the science, but then on the back end, when the science starts failing, when the science doesn't match the the politics, and it's like, oh, well, let's not follow the science. And the science is saying we shouldn't let people in from China.
True. Now, let me get a super chat here. And yes, what is this? Oh, okay. I would love to have laws be like policies of a hospital. They have to be reevaluated every 3 years. And if they aren't working, they're either struck down or revised. I'm actually torn up because I would say throw out about 90% of the laws that are out there right now. That's sort of my mentality. And the revision part is what bothers me. I understand the reevaluating it, but it's like, I feel like we spend a lot of time thinking, oh, there ought to be a law for that, and worrying about a law for something versus, do we have something already? Because you probably could, use what's there and maybe not create 10 more laws that then are going to come up with 30 more problems that were unforeseen. So that we need to create new laws to help mitigate those unforeseen problems that we have.
That's what Thomas Jefferson, that was his big idea, that all the laws should expire within like a certain amount of time frame. So the legislature would always have to, develop, well, is this still a good idea for us to continue this on? Even criminal laws, criminal statutes and stuff that are usually there forever. And it makes sense because also too, you start getting to the fact where you have professional legislators. What are they going to do? They just write more laws.
Back then, that people don't realize that we did not have professional politicians early on in the country, and that's why the House only has 2-year terms. Why is it only 2 years? Because it was a hardship. Because they had farms to run, businesses to run, they had things at home, they had families, and serving their country was actually kind of a hardship. So they only had to do 2 years. They did not anticipate, oh, we're going to have people who are going to park forever.
Yeah. Well, also too, just want to make it clear, from the Constitutional Convention, they said that they wanted to make they wanted to make more responsive to the people. Mm-hmm. So when something, exactly, and the Senate was supposed to be the driving, thought-driven. Only landowners could be senators, for instance, but the House was supposed to be a little more changeable because it's supposed to be more reflective of the people, and that's why a lot of people believe the House has. Well, if you think about it, I think the founders of this country did such a great job with separating the separation of powers, because even with the House, you can have a maniac House, but then the Senate is still that body that for instance, wouldn't convict Trump, where you had, I think, a very political House, but still they still left the measure in there with cooler heads. I think eventually would prevail.
Well, and, I can go completely crazy. I don't think we should be direct voting for the Senate. I think that was actually appropriate. That's why there was 2 from every state. It was representing the state.
Yeah.
So we vote for this. We vote for our representatives in the state. They choose the Senate. So we're, getting it one part removed. I mean, that's the way it was designed.
Yeah, it was designed. Yes, that way. Yes.
So a senator is supposed to be more of a representative of the state, and they need to spend more time in the state. But anyway,
but then they changed that. But they changed that by constitutional amendment. I think now it's So constitutional. That's interesting because you're right. But so is the president though. The president is not supposed to be. There's supposed to be no popular vote. It's supposed to be all party bosses or whatever get together, and that's what the electoral college is.
Electoral college, but not. Yes, here we go. 17th Amendment. Well, the Electoral College is still representative of the people, and we're voting for our electors who are then choosing. So it is still
that's because don't forget now, because the Supreme Court ruled the faithless electors, you can't, because they can do it by statute. But generally, before the faithless electors, you actually weren't even voting for the electors. You're voting for which party can select electors. So I'm voting for the Democrats, and then the Democrats goes to select its 12 people to go vote. So it's a weird it's a weird little system. But yeah, it was actually put in place deliberately so
yes,
that
because they verified a democracy.
well, they said democracy was the devil, and it was, and a lot of people don't realize that that the founders were more afraid of the tyranny of the majority than anything. That's why they put the processes in they put in. So you couldn't just have a majority vote and take away people's rights. It had to be overwhelming support for something like that.
Well, and that's the other part that I feel that people get wrong. I mean, you probably disagree, but whatever. The Bill of Rights is not a grant; it is an acknowledgement.
Well,
it is saying, no, these are the rights that you naturally have, and we acknowledge them. Freedom of speech. You're born with that. You have that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, we as a government grant you the freedom of speech. It's saying we as a government acknowledge, no, that's your right. And I think people have that backwards. They think that it's like something that's just granted and can be turned on and off, but is not designed that way. It is literally supposed to be an acknowledgement. Those are supposed to be, quote, God-given rights. And I think that was even written in the Federalist paper.
Well, two things. I think sometimes non-lawyers look at the Constitution as a document that it's hard to explain. The Constitution tells the government two important things: what it can do, and specifically what it can't do, right? So it's supposed to be a document that says you can do whatever's in here, Commerce Clause, this, that, right? And what's never not in here, you can't do it. So you'll see some things like what's it called? I'm thinking about some things that contract law and stuff like that. It's not mentioned specifically in the Constitution, so it's left up to the states. A lot of times you'll hear police powers of the states. A lot of the criminal law and the penal codes and stuff are left up to the states. Police powers of the states.
The majority is supposed to.
Yes, but when it
everything,
when it comes to I'm trying to figure out the best way, because sometimes it's a little difficult sometimes to explain. But when it comes to the rights that are announced, it's saying that Congress can make no law. So it's a document restricting just the government from even considering doing something like this, to hinder the rights. So in a way, I think you're right. It's saying that it's not actually giving you a right. It's just saying the government can't do X. I can't create a law to do X, right? I'm not saying you have the right to do it. I'm saying the government can't do something. Yeah.
That is your natural right.
Yeah.
And they can't take it away. Congress shall not create a law to take away your speech, which is right. That's why I said it's an acknowledgement. It is not a grant.
Yeah. I agree with the terminology. I would say it's an acknowledgement, because it's really a lot of now a lot of legal scholars are making the distinction between liberties and rights, and I think that's where this is going, because a lot of times people will say, well, the Bill of Rights actually should be called the Bill of Liberties, right? You have the liberty to speak, you have the liberty to do this, you have the liberty to do this, versus the Bill of Rights.
I disagree with completely. I think it's a right. I think it's absolutely right. It's not a because the liberty again is saying, we're letting you kids play. And those are the people who want that strong central government who dictates everything and says, okay, well, you can now, but you can't later. No, bullshit. It's a right. And people were born with it. So that is my belief.
Yeah, I have to look at it, because I know there has been some academic work on the difference between liberties and rights and what's liberty and right. I have to look it up again, because I remember we used to have a lot of great debates about it. But I just want to look to make sure it's still even something that's still out there.
Perfect analogy, one that actually is an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the military, especially the Navy, when a ship pulls into a port, the sailors are given, quote, liberty. Mm-hmm. So they can now leave the ship, go amongst the people, do whatever they're allowed to do within the reason, and then they are to return. So that liberty, again, is a grant from a higher authority. And this is why I disagree with it in every way, because a liberty, I feel, is a grant. versus a right, which is something that someone already has.
See, this is what they. I just looked it up. They said the legal distinction is civil liberties are freedoms granted to us by the U.S. Constitution to protect us from the tyranny of the government. Freedom of speech, for instance, is an example. Like we say with it's a right, they legal scholars consider that to be a liberty, and a right is a legal right that is protected individuals from things like discrimination. So employment discrimination, you have the right not to be discriminated against. You have the right to remain silent. So those would be rights. Those would be the versus liberties.
Just on the face, because it's saying that it is being given, but I don't think it is. And I think that you probably will have your legal scholars that argue the other side.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at it, and they list the civil liberties as freedom of speech, privacy, the right to remain silent, the right to the right to a free trial. They're all listed as rights, but they consider them. I'm just looking at some of the works here. They're all consider them to be liberties. But I think if it's your, I do understand you. In other words, you're saying we already, but all right. So you're saying you have the natural right to remain silent. You have the natural right to be free from unreasonable search and seizures, right? Yes. And that's what they're saying. That's a liberty, because that, in other words, the government is saying we're restricting us. You're being restricted from doing that. You have the right to marry. I don't know. I think you're right. I think it's interesting because I tend to agree with you, but maybe it's just a linguistic thing where they consider it to be liberties versus rights. Well,
because they're coming from the point of power, and that's why I have an issue with it. Is if you look at the wording very carefully, it's written right there what they just said. It is granting. So that is saying that it had it and it gave it to you. I'm saying that's bullshit. It never had it. And that's the stance that I absolutely believe. I believe when you are born, you have the right to speech. And I believe that any country that takes that away is stealing that from you. You're not giving it, doing anything better by saying, oh, we're not going to steal that from you. That's essentially what it is. So that is my stance. I'm saying, it's the same way as I think everybody has a right to breathe.
No, but all right, like I believe everybody should have the right to free speech, right? But there are some countries that don't give you that don't recognize that to be a right, right?
I agree with that. They were wrong, and that's why I don't want to be there.
So I just want to make it very different from the moral judgment of I'm thinking it's wrong than the legal judgment of whether it's a right or a liberty. Because the moral judgment, yes, you're right. I believe it's wrong not to not give your citizens the freedom of speech, or for the citizens not to have freedom of speech. But I think in a legal context, it's different, because if that's the case, then we have examples of government removing that right and granting that right. So which makes it more seem like a liberty than a right in that particular context. But again, I think this maybe just be a semantic issue.
And that's a game with it. I'm saying that those countries are stealing from their people.
Yeah, and again, that's what I'm saying. I think this may just be a semantic issue on the because again, at the end of the day, we're both saying the same thing, right? They should have the right, but you're saying it is stealing a natural right versus granting that natural right. And I agree.
That's a huge stance difference, though, because if you're saying, "Oh no, we granted that to you, but right now it's not convenient for us, so we'll take away that grant for a little while," you've got built-in justification. But if you take it where I'm standing, no, you cannot take that away ever, because you never had it. It's not yours. If you do it, you are stealing from your people, and that's
But that's again, that's a moral judgment. But in the real world, it's a legal determination of liberties, right? So the moral judgment is yes, if you do that, you're stealing it from the people. But the reality is, there's not more. There are a lot of countries that don't give that right, and you're saying that right is being taken from the people. Yes. And I think, but I think the argument could be made on the side that the people, because really the government is an expression of the people, right? The sovereignty of the people, in general. And you have dictators who take it over, but they'll still, like, in North Korea, they call themselves the People Republic of the North Korea, right? It's the North Korean people. That's who gives us the power.
People's anything is.
But I just I don't know. I agree that in the United States, because most of the time, remember the power used to come from the kings and all that stuff, and to be endowed by the kings. So I think you're right. I think naturally, and I think that's the United States makeup is naturally all these rights that we have come from God, and that from the Creator. They didn't mention God, but from the Creator, and that these rights, and that this was an expression, like you're saying, of the government saying these rights, the government can make no law because you've already got those rights. I accept that, even though I think that's more of a moral judgment than a legal determination. But I definitely can see where you're going, and I would agree. I agree with the interpretation, but then in an academic setting, I don't think I could go that far. I would say I would call them liberties in that sense.
All right. Well, on that note, we can all agree that everybody subscribe, please.
We're having a very high technical conversation about liberties and rights here.
Oh, you're with a non-lawyer laughing your ass off.
No. This is good because it's making me think. Because your stance isn't crazy. It makes sense, and it's a stance that actually I want to take. But then I'm trying to figure out, because I don't see any problem with it. I actually like it. I actually like it. And I think it's well reasoned. But I'm just, because I like to always challenge my own ideas, and I accept your ideas, and I like it. I'm going to actually go look this up. I think it's fascinating.
Twitter war will start tomorrow. No. Nate will be on the panel, especially with Viva, and quite often the next day the Twitter conflicts continues. No, I got this article. No, I got that, which I love, by the way. I wish that everybody had passionate conversations where they don't even necessarily agree or disagree. I love hanging out and challenging whatever.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is that a lot of people live in their echo chambers and are never challenged with their ideas. And the fact that we do challenge each other, and we can say when we're wrong. Like I remember, I think I had a big argument with Nick on Twitter. I was like, oh, I was wrong, blah, 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 blah. And people were like, oh, why'd you say you were wrong? Like, because I was wrong. Like, why would I not say I was wrong? It doesn't make any sense to just say I'm right when I know I'm wrong, Like but I think that's the problem. I think a lot of people are into these conversations. They look at them as battles and not as conversations. And if you're looking at every conversation as a battle, it's got to be won or lost, then you've already got something mentally involved in it, versus looking at the conversation to learn from the other side. And I go into all conversations saying, either I'm going to teach you something, or you're going to teach me why I'm wrong. And if you teach me why I'm wrong, I've learned more from that conversation than if I believe that I'm right. Because if I'm wrong about something and I believe something that's been wrong, I want to be corrected. I don't want to believe the stuff that's not true. I don't want to go around saying the wrong things. I'd rather someone say you're wrong about this and show me why I'm wrong, and so I can start saying the right things.
Nope, totally agree with that in every way. And I'm frequently wrong, so I'm well practiced. So, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm not Barnes, so I suck at doing this, but Eric, unstructured.locals.com. Nate the lawyer.locals.com. I actually, I'm changing my website. It's erichunley.com. If anybody wants to go there.
I just got NateTheLawyer.com locked down. So
nice. Everybody, if you like it, please subscribe. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me on. This was great.